Now, the interesting thing about this particular agreement is that it actually has no, it's not legally binding. It's not like a free trade agreement or NAFTA or a WTO agreement. It has no legislative authority, and it shows that, unfortunately, the other side is not stupid, and they learn from their mistakes. They know that if they had a formal agreement and they were working to have it signed, and it was in the legislatures, in the House of Commons and in Congress and in the Congress in Mexico, that it would never pass, that people would massively oppose this. And I'm absolutely convinced of that. The more that Canadians know about this agreement, the more will oppose it. It is so egregious, it is so outrageous in terms of its sacrifice of Canadians' sovereignty and democracy that it would be opposed. And so they're very careful about how they implement this. Last September in Banff there was a meeting of extremely high-profile people put together by something called the North American Forum. Now, the only newspaper that covered it while it was happening was the Banff Weekly. And I think it's only because he knew someone at the hotel. But now we did get a leaked document that's told us who was supposed to be at the meeting, but we were never able to completely confirm this. But Rumsfeld was supposed to have been there. George Shultz, who was a former Secretary of State of the United States, was supposed to have been there. Rick Hillier, Defense Minister O'Connor, and Stockwell Day. Stockwell Day said, well, I'm not going to confirm or deny I was at the meeting, and even if I was at the meeting, I wouldn't tell you. I mean, and it was because it was a private meeting, and whoever was there, it was private. I mean, it just shows you how it shows you how ingrained this is in the political elite, that they believe that it's perfectly okay for a minister of the Crown to refuse to say what happened at this meeting, even though its whole discussion was the security of North America. Now, on April 27th and 28th of this year, there were two other meetings held, sponsored by a right-wing think tank called the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It was held in Calgary to discuss ensuring U.S. energy security. It was funded by the Mexican and American governments, but held in Canada because, of course, Canada is the magic key for U.S. energy security. But why would we be discussing American energy security? But that's what the meeting was about. The second meeting was about bulk water exports and the environment. Now, this center, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, is planning 5 other meetings along the same lines, all to do with deep integration. A document, now I don't know if the document was leaked or whether it's official, but in any case, the document they produced was called the North American Future 2025 Project, and it feeds directly into the Security and Prosperity Partnership. It has 105 recommendations about how to integrate Canada into the U.S. As we speak, there are 12 cross-border tripartite committees working on literally thousands of regulations. Of course, the favorite term is harmonization, which is another one of those words that's designed to make you feel good. Who would oppose harmony, after all? But, of course, it's harmonizing downwards. It's not harmonizing upwards. And they are literally engaging thousands of bureaucrats in the 3 countries in a completely or almost completely secret process. 300 areas of regulation, according to Peter Julian, NDP MP, who's been trying to dig into this as much as possible. 300 areas of regulation are currently being looked at to be harmonized. And one of the things, and you may have read this recently, maybe while you're here tonight, was about pesticide residues on fruit and vegetables. And it was actually, again, a surprise to me, but published by CanWest, and didn't appear in very many other publications or on other on radio and television very much, but it reported that they were harmonizing regulations between the United States and Canada on the allowable level of pesticide residues on fruits and vegetables. And why was this? Well, because the Trade Department said that this was a trade irritant. And that's exactly how they define and how they rationalize deregulation, is that all regulations are somehow a barrier to trade. And that was the straightforward answer of the person in charge of establishing the standards in Canada. So that you can imagine, I mean, of 300 areas of regulation, virtually everything you can imagine is being harmonized. One of the things that will be next is what they call single testing for pharmaceuticals. So if it's tested in the U.S., we don't need to test it here. And you can remember all the things that have gone on in the States recently, Vioxx and other drugs, Avandia, the diabetic drug, which actually causes heart attacks. And these are drugs that are tested in the U.S. And we've already moved in that direction here, by the way. Drug companies here, Paul Martin cut the budget for our testing of pharmaceuticals in Canada by 60%. And now companies basically operate as clients. So they pay the drug testing in Canada, pay for it, and then, of course, they expect to get a positive result. So we've already moved down that road, but we'll move even further down under deep integration. The NDP had managed to force hearings into the Security and Prosperity Partnership in the International Trade Committee, and they brought in Gordon Laxer from the Parkland Institute in Edmonton to speak about energy security for Canada, pointing out that we don't have any, that we in fact have no national energy program, no national energy policy, and he barely got started, and the chairperson cut him off, demanded that he quit speaking, and said that his testimony was irrelevant. Fortunately, the Bloc, Liberal, and NDP all, because they have a majority, reversed the decision, whereupon the chairman adjourned the meeting and stomped out, which was actually against the rules, but he did it anyway. And then they did continue to hear Gordon Laxer speak. But it shows you how paranoid the government has become. And, of course, what Laxer was trying to point out was that Canada is only one of 2 countries of 24 of the International Energy Agency who do not have, who have not even researched how much energy Canada needs for the future. Norway hasn't done it because Norway provides all of its own needs before it exports a single drop of oil. And now, of course, you know that on, was it yesterday or Monday, they implemented the no-fly list in Canada. So now we have, and that was one of the, I mentioned earlier that the right-wing think tank had 105 recommendations. This was one of them, that there be a coordinated no-fly list. And, of course, that no-fly list will be in the hands of the United States, because the no-fly lists are given to airlines that fly back and forth between the United States and Canada. So it's already in the hands of the U.S., which means that anyone found in the United States who manages to fly into the U.S. will now be subject to the Military Commissions Act, which will virtually guarantee the same kind of treatment that Maher Arar got when he was detained in the United States. Another recent development was that, he's actually said this before, but David Dodge, in a speech not to Canadians but to Americans, said that it was very possible that Canada, in the future could adopt the American dollar. This is the man who is the head of the Bank of Canada. He's essentially saying that it's quite possible that the Bank of Canada could disappear, because if we adopted the Canadian dollar, we would have no control over monetary policy, and the Bank of Canada would be irrelevant. And he is the head of the Bank of Canada. And he was also the man who advised and convinced Paul Martin to make all those enormous cuts to social programs. Has a lot to answer for.